in the e-commerce project. And you'll see that we have the HTML and the text for the e-commerce project home page. Now, obviously, this doesn't look very good, so let's move over the CSS next. To move the CSS into our React project, we're going to go back to our code, and we're going to open the starting code index.html. And here we're going to scroll up, and we load 3 CSS files. So we're going to move these 3 files into our React project. We'll start with general.css. If we open styles/shared, which is here, and shared, and open general.css, this file contains CSS for the overall website. CSS for the overall website goes into the index.css file in React. So we'll click general.css, and we'll press Ctrl A on Windows or Command A on Mac to select all of this code, and we'll copy. And inside index.css in the e-commerce project, we're going to remove all of this default code and paste and save. And now if we go back to the starting code, we've moved over general.css, and we can delete this file. And now we'll go back to the starting code index.html. And we can remove this line. And we'll move header.css and index.css into our React project. So both of these style the home page. So we'll just move these files beside our home page component. First, we'll go into styles shared and header.css, and we're going to drag this file into our pages folder. So we keep our CSS beside the component that it styles. And we'll scroll down and find styles/pages, and we'll move index.css beside the home page as well. So header.css styles the header at the top of the page, and index.css styles the main part of the home page. Now, a best practice is to use the same name as the component here. So we'll right-click index.css, and we'll rename it capital H home, capital P page. Next, to load these styles, we need to import them. We'll open homepage.jsx, and at the top, we're going to import a string, and we'll import the file ./header.css. And we'll also import a string ./homepage.css and save. And now, if we go back to the starting code, index.html, we moved all of the HTML and CSS into our project. So now we can delete this file. Finally, we'll open app.css, and these styles were for the default React website. So we don't need these anymore, so we can select all of the CSS and just remove it and save. So make sure that we saved all of our files, and now we're going to view the website. And now it's looking really good. We have the structure and the styling that we need. The only thing that's missing are the images. So let's move the images next. To move the images, we'll go back to VS Code, and we'll go to the starting code and find the images folder. So this contains all the images that we need. So we're going to move this into the React project. Now, usually we put images in the assets folder, and then we import the images. However, to save time, we're going to move this folder into the public folder. So we're going to move it up here and into the public folder. The reason we move it into the public folder is because if we look at homepage.jsx and we look at an image, notice the source attribute starts with images slash. When using Vite, if we start with a folder name like this, Vite will look for this inside the public folder. So it finds it here. So by moving our images into the public folder, we don't have to change any of this code, and it just saves time in the video. We can move these images into the source/assets folder and import them later as an exercise. So now let's open our website, and all of the images are loaded. So that's how we move an HTML website into a React website. We just move over the HTML, CSS, and images one by one. Let's go back to VS Code, and we'll save our changes into Git. We'll open the Git section, and here we moved all the HTML, CSS, and images for the homepage. We're going to type a message at the top, move the home page into React, and press commit. Next, we're going to move the checkout page to the React setup. We'll go to our browser, and we're going to open the final project at supersimple.dev, and we're going to click the cart icon in the top right. This will open the checkout page, where we can see our cart and we can place an order. So notice that this is a separate page from the home page, and this page is also on a different URL, /checkout. So how do we create multiple pages in React? To do that, we're going to learn a feature called routing. Routing lets us create multiple pages in React. Let's go back to our code, and we'll open our files here. And we're going to scroll down first to the starting code folder. So normally, to create multiple pages, we need to create multiple HTML files, like here. Each page has its own HTML file, like the checkout page and the orders page. However, inside these files, notice that there's a lot of repeated code. So each file has the doc type, it has some meta and link elements, and in the orders.html, it has the same meta and link elements. So this is not great because if we want to change something on one page, we have to change all of the pages. On the other hand, routing lets us create multiple pages using one HTML file, and this lets us reuse our HTML code. To use routing, we're going to install an npm package called React Router. So let's reopen our terminal. You can click here and drag up, or press Ctrl-J on Windows or Command-J on Mac to open this terminal. Now we currently have the Vite server running, so we'll press Ctrl-C on Windows and Mac to stop the Vite server. And to install React Router, we're going to run the command npm install react-router, and we'll also type @ So for this video, we'll use a specific version of React Router, just to make sure that it works with the video. So click this link in the description, go to lesson 6, and here you'll find the version of React Router that we'll use, and you'll also find the full command. So again, you should always use the version that you see on your page. So select the version on your page and copy it, and then in our command line, we're going to paste that version and press enter to install. So now, how do we use React Router? Like most packages, React Router has a documentation page that tells you how to use it. You can find the documentation in the description, but for the video, I'm going to show you the parts of the documentation that we need. According to the documentation, to use React Router, we need to load it when we render the app component. So in our project, we're going to scroll up and open main.jsx. And I'll close these other files so we can see more of the code. So in this file, we set up React. We render our app component on the page. According to the documentation, we need to wrap this in a component called browser router. So at the top, first we're going to import curly brackets, the browser router from a string, and we'll import it from the package react-router. As a review, if we just start with a name like this without /, this means it's going to load it from node modules from the React Router package. And now, around the app, we're going to create less than browser router greater than, and we're going to put the app inside here. So we'll cut this and paste it in here. Let's save. Next, we need to do a bit more setup. According to the documentation, inside our app component, we need to add a component called routes. So let's open app.jsx. And at the top, we're going to import curly brackets, the component routes from a string, and we'll import this from the package react-router. And inside this component, we're going to insert the routes component using less than routes greater than. So the routes component tells React all the pages that are in our website. So to add a page to our website, we're going to use another component called route. A route is basically a page. So first we need to import that. At the top, we're already importing from React Router. So we're going to add a comma and import the route component. So inside routes, we're going to add less than route greater than. So again, a route basically adds a page to our website. And we're going to give this route two props. The first prop is called path equals double quotes. This tells React the URL path of this page. The URL path is the last part of the URL, like /checkout or /orders. So first, let's add the home page. For the home page, the URL path is empty. To set the URL path as empty, we're going to set it to /. And then we're going to give route a second prop called element equals curly brackets. So this tells React which element or component to display when we go to this URL path. For the home page, we want to display this homepage component. So let's select it and cut. And inside here, we're going to paste. So this tells React that when we go to the URL path / or empty, it's going to display our homepage. So let's try it out. We'll save this file. And then inside the terminal, we're going to start the Vite server using npm run dev. And we'll visit this URL. I already have it open, so I'll open my browser. And now, if the URL path ends with / or empty, it's going to display the home page. Next, let's use React Router to add a checkout page. We'll go back to our code. And to add another page to our website, we're going to use the route component again. So we'll create less than route greater than, and we'll give it two props. The path equals double quotes. And for the checkout page, we'll set the URL path to checkout. This means this page will be displayed when we go to /checkout. And we'll give it another prop, element equals curly brackets. And right now, we didn't create a component for the checkout page yet. So let's just create a div here just to make sure that this is working. So we'll create a div element, and inside, let's type test checkout page and save. So now if we go to our project, and in the URL path, we're going to go to /checkout and press enter. It displays the div with the text that we created. So as you can see, routing is actually pretty simple. We just tell React which pages we want in our website and then what to display for each page. Now let's learn some more details about routing. If we look at our code, we now have multiple pages in our website. And all of these pages use one HTML file, which is index.html. So this HTML is shared between all of our pages, and this reduces repetition. By the way, this is called a single page application, or an SPA. This means we only have one HTML file, and instead we use React to create multiple pages. Next, we'll use some shortcuts with React Router. The first shortcut is instead of path equals /, React Router has a prop for this called index. So this does the same thing as path equals /. The second shortcut is currently we don't have anything inside these route components, so we can use the self-closing element shortcut. We'll remove the closing tag, and at the end here, we'll add a space and a /. And same thing here. We'll remove the closing tag and add a space and /, and save. And now we'll save these changes into Git. We'll open the Git section. And here, it tells us we installed React Router. And in app.jsx, we added some routes or some pages to our website. In main.jsx, we loaded the React Router. So let's create a message to describe these changes. Create multiple pages using React-Router and commit. Now let's move the checkout page into our app. We'll go back to our files, and first we'll open app.jsx. And instead of displaying a div when we go to /checkout, let's remove it. And let's create a component for the checkout page, just like the home page. In the pages folder, we'll click this, and we'll create a new file. And we'll name this C checkout, P page.jsx. And inside here, we'll create a new component using function checkout page brackets and curly brackets. And we'll return brackets, and we'll move the HTML for the checkout page in here. So we'll go to the starting code folder, and we'll open checkout.html. So this is the HTML file for the checkout page. We're going to scroll down to the body element first, and we're going to move over this HTML. So we'll click here to collapse this code, and click here to collapse this code as well. And we'll select all this HTML, and we'll cut, and then inside checkout page, inside the return, we're going to paste. And let's scroll up, and we'll fix these errors. So first, if we collapse these two elements, remember we're returning two elements from this component, which causes an error. To fix this, we'll wrap this in a fragment. and we'll fix the indenting. Now, you can fix it manually like we did before, but you can also use this shortcut. We can press Ctrl-Shift-P on Windows or Command-Shift-P on Mac. And this will open up a list of commands that we can use in VS Code. So we're going to search for the command format document. And we can click it or press enter. And it will automatically format the code in this document and fix the indenting. Next, if we expand these elements, remember in React, we have to use class name instead of class. To replace these, or press Ctrl F or Command F to find code, and we'll find the code class equals, and click this arrow, and we're going to replace it with class name equals, and click replace all. And finally, the last ESLint error here is this component is not used in this file. So we need to export it and save. And now let's use this component in our route. We'll open app.jsx, and at the top, we'll import the page using import curly brackets, the checkout page from a string, and we'll import ./pages/checkout page. And we'll use it inside this route using less than checkout page / greater than, and save. And now let's check our website. And if we go to the path /checkout, you can see we have the HTML for the checkout page. Now let's add the rest of the code for the checkout page. We'll go back to VS Code, and we're going to go to the starting code and open checkout.html. And we're going to move this over one by one. So first, what do we do for this title? Right now, all of our pages are sharing one HTML file here. So all of the pages have the same title, e-commerce project. However, we want each page to have a different title. So how do we do that? Well, in React, it's actually pretty simple. We just have to take this title and move it into our page component. So we'll select this and cut, and then we'll scroll up and open checkoutpage.jsx. And if we want this page to have a different title, all we have to do is to paste the title at the top and save. So if we look at our website, now the checkout page has the title checkout in the tabs. So we'll go back to our code, and we're also going to set the title in the home page. So we'll open the home page, and in the home page, let's create a title, and we're going to set the title to e-commerce project and save. And now we can scroll down to the index.html, and we can remove this title because we're going to set it using React and save. And now let's move the rest of the HTML in the checkout page. If we scroll down here, these meta and link elements have already been moved to index.html. So this is being shared across all of our pages. So we actually don't need to move this over anymore because it's shared. So we can remove all of this code. And finally, we're going to move over the CSS for this page. For general.css, remember that we already copied these styles into index.css. So we don't need to move this anymore. And now we'll just move checkout_header.css and checkout.css into our React project. So we'll go to styles/pages/checkout, and we'll move checkout_header.css into the React project, into here, and scroll down. And we'll also move checkout.css into our React project. beside the component. And now that we moved everything over, we can delete the checkout.html file. So we can delete this file. Finally, let's scroll up, and we're going to rename the CSS file to match the component name. So we'll right-click and rename checkout page.css. And now we'll load these two CSS files using import. So in checkout page.jsx at the top, we'll import a string, and we'll import the CSS file .checkout-header.css. And we'll also import ./checkout page.css and save. We'll go to our website, and now everything looks really good. So we finished moving all the HTML and CSS for the checkout page into our React project. Let's go back to our code, and we'll save these changes into Git. We'll open the Git section, and in app.jsx, we use the checkout page component for /checkout, and then we moved over the CSS files, and in here, we moved over the HTML code, as well as the title. Let's type a message to describe these changes. Move checkout page into React and commit. Before we continue moving pages, there's an issue that we need to fix. If we open the website and click the top left icon, normally this should take us to the home page, but now it's blank. So why is this not working? Notice in the URL, the path is /index.html. Before, this website was split up into multiple HTML files, and index.html created the home page. But now we're using routing, so we set the URL paths ourselves. In our project, we set the path / to be the home page, and we set the path /checkout to be the checkout page. So we need to go into our code and update all of the links to go to the correct URL path. We'll go back to VS Code, and to update all of our links, we're going to go to the search section of VS Code. We can press Ctrl-Shift-F on Windows or Command-Shift-F on Mac. And here, we can search inside all of our files. First, let's search for the code index.html. This will give us a list of A elements or link elements. And href means where these links should go. So now, instead of index.html, these links should go to /. To replace index.html in all these places, we can click this arrow on the left to open the Replace menu, and we'll replace this with /. And then click here to replace all, and confirm. And let's replace the links for the other pages as well. So up here, we'll also search for checkout.html. And in this search result, we have a link element with the href checkout.html. And in our router, we set the URL path for the checkout page to /checkout. So we'll replace all of these with /checkout and replace all. And we'll do the same thing for the orders page, which is orders.html. And here we'll change it to /orders and replace. And finally, we also have a tracking page. So here, we're going to search for tracking.html and replace it with /tracking and replace all. And now all of our links should work correctly because they match our router. if we open the website and at the top, we change the URL path to /checkout, it opens the checkout page. If we click the top left icon, this should now go to the URL path / or empty, and it will open the home page. So let's save this into Git. We'll open the Git section, and we just updated all the links in these files to match the router. Let's type the message, update links to match the router, and commit. Next, let's move the orders page into our React project. Feel free to pause the video if you want to try it yourself first. So we'll go back to our files, and first, let's create a component for the orders page. Inside the pages folder, we'll create a new file, and we'll name it orders page.jsx and press enter. And inside here, we'll create a component, function, orders page, brackets and curly brackets, and we'll return brackets, and we'll move over the HTML. So we'll go back to the starting code folder and open orders.html. We'll start with the body, so we'll scroll down, and we can collapse these two elements, and we'll select the HTML and cut, and inside the orders page, inside the return, we'll paste. We'll scroll up and collapse these elements, and we're going to wrap these in a fragment, less than greater than, and remove this, and at the end, less than / greater than. And to fix the indenting, we can use the shortcut Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and search for the command format document and press enter. Again, we need to rename class to class name. So we'll press Control-F or Command-F to find code. We'll search for class equals, click here, and replace it with class name, and replace all. And finally, at the top, we'll export this component. Let's save this file. Let's go back to orders.html, scroll up, and we'll move over this code. So for the title, we're going to move it into the component. We'll select it, cut, and at the top, in orders page, we're going to paste it at the top. Let's go back to orders.html. And these meta and link elements are already inside index.html, so we can remove this. And finally, we'll move the CSS files over. So general.css was already moved into index.css. We already moved over header.css up here. So we just need to move the orders.css. So inside starting code, we'll go into styles/pages, and we'll move this orders.css file. So we'll move it up here beside the orders page component. And now we moved over everything inside orders.html. So we can scroll down and delete this file. Next, we should rename orders.css to match the component name. So we'll right click and rename orders page.css. And finally, we'll load the CSS files. So in orders page.jsx, at the top, we're going to import a string. And remember, this requires the header and the orders page CSS. So first we'll import ./header.css, and we'll also import ./orders page.css and save. And now we moved over all the HTML and CSS for the orders page. So now let's create a route for this page. We'll go to app.jsx. And first at the top, we're going to import curly brackets, the orders page from a string, and we'll locate ./pages/orders page. And then down here, we're going to add another route. So at the end, we'll add less than route greater than, and we can remove this and use the self-closing element shortcut. And we'll give it two props. We'll set the path equals double quotes, and we'll put the orders page on the path /orders. And we'll give it an element to display equals curly brackets. And for the orders page, we'll display the element less than orders page /greater than, and save. And now let's view the website. We'll open the website, and on the homepage, we're going to click this orders link to go to /orders. And it displays the orders page. So that looks pretty good. And now we finished moving the orders page into React. So let's go back to VS Code. And in the starting code, there's one more page to move over, which is the tracking page. But I'll leave this as an exercise. So now let's save these changes into Git. Open the Git section. In app.jsx, we added a new route for the orders page, and we moved over the CSS and the HTML. So we'll type the message, move orders page to React, and commit. Next, we're going to separate our page into smaller components. For example, if we look at our website, notice that on the orders page, there's this header at the top. And if we click the top left and go to the home page, we have the same header at the top of the page. So it's a good idea to separate the header into a component so we can reuse it between these pages. We'll go back to VS Code, and we'll open our files, and we're going to open homepage.jsx. And at the top here, we have the HTML for the header. If we collapse it, this is all the HTML for the header. Let's separate this into a shared component. Now, because this component is shared between multiple pages, we usually put shared components in a folder called components. So inside our source folder, we're going to click it and create a new folder, and we'll call it components. So the components folder is for shared components, and the pages folder is for components that are specific to a page. Inside the components folder, we'll create a new file, and let's name it header.jsx. And in here, we'll create a component for the header using function header, brackets and curly brackets, and we'll return brackets, and we'll move over the HTML. So we'll open homepage.jsx, and we're going to select the HTML for the header and cut. Inside header.jsx, inside here, we're going to paste. And we'll fix the indenting by pressing Ctrl-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P and search for Format Document and press Enter. And we'll scroll to the top. And lastly, we're going to export this component to remove this error. Next, we should also move over the CSS for the header. Now, luckily, the CSS for the header has already been separated into header.css. So we can just move this over to beside the component. So we want to keep the CSS close to the component so it's easy to find. So at the top of this, we can import the CSS using import a string, and we'll import ./header.css and save. So now that we created this header component, we can reuse it in the homepage and the orders page. We'll open homepage.jsx, and at the top, first, we don't need to import the header anymore. It's already done by this component, so we can remove it. And let's import the component using import curly brackets, the header from a string. And now we need to locate this file. So currently we're inside the pages folder. So we need to get out of this folder using .. and then go into the components folder. Components/